Namaskar friends, welcome to Utkarsh in English, a exclusive YouTube channel for English medium students. I am your host Pavan Kumar Jha and we are having the class on education psychology. And today's topic is behaviorism, one of the most popular topic of psychology as well as any exam if you are giving in education or in psychology. It is one of the very famous and very important. So let us start with the brief history of behaviorism. The behaviorist movement, the movement we call as behaviorist movement, who has started the theory as behaviorism, has actually began in 1913 when John Watson wrote an article entitled Psychology as the Behaviorist Views It, which set out a number of underlying assumptions regarding the methodology of behaviorism and various behavioral analysis. So, this is called the official start of the behaviorism. Then he has actually classified the school of thought as the behaviorism when in 1925 the book named Behaviorism was published by Watson. So the official start of the school of thought and its name as behaviorism was started in 1925 when Watson has published the book Behaviorism. But the behaviorist movement, the start of the school of thought as a dominant force in the psychology and later on in the education psychology, has started when John Watson has wrote and read the psychology as the behaviorist view, an article in the magazine. So it is best summed by the following quote from the Watson. So Watson is called father of behaviorism. John B. Watson is called behaviorism, and if we have to see what is behaviorism like, so we can study the famous quote of Watson. Give me a dozen healthy infants, well formed and my own specified world to bring them up in, and I will guarantee to take any one at random and train him to become any type of specialist I might select. That is, a doctor, lawyer, artist, merchant, chief, and yes, even beggar, man, thief, regardless of his talents, penchants, tendencies, abilities, vocations, and race of his ancestors. So what we see that this is the famous quote which has popularized the behaviorism in education. This is one of the thing which is being liked by the contemporary parents and the social members also, and at that time of era it is also very popular because everybody wants their ward to do well off. So they are planning for various things that every individual parent thinks that his ward should become a doctor, his ward should become an engineer, a lawyer, a businessman. So these kind of things are actually being expected by the parents and the society from the next generation. So this line was very catchy and it has propagated to the masses. Therefore, we have seen that behaviorism being a dominant force in the education psychology also. So, the students who have just joined us, welcome to all. Good evening. Let us continue with our topic because it is a very long topic and we have to complete it within stipulated time. So, I will not just talk much But if you have any questions, you can ask me. Any problem you can have, you can ask through comments and have the clarification on those doubts. So, strict behaviorists believe that all behaviors are the results of experiences. So they are, when we are talking about the behaviorism, all behaviorists are of the one point of view that the behaviors are the result of the experiences. Any person, regardless of his or her background, can be trained or act in a particular manner given the right conditioning. So they have said that the regardless of his or her background can be trained to act in a particular manner given the right conditioning. Actually, the movement has started the training. Prior to this, most of the people and educationists believe that the child is born with certain kind of privileges. Like if we are talking about the Indian system, most of the people say that if the father and the mother are intelligent, they are literate, they are doing something, the child can do it. Like we have seen the kings actually give their dynasty and clan to their next generation. But Watson has said that no, your background is not important. Behaviorist has said that, various behaviorists had worked upon it, that your background, your genetics is not important. The individual can be trained to become anything. Therefore, they have started the training for teachers also, like the teachers in education psychology and education technology. Now we are training the teachers. So how the teachers can be trained or a army man can be trained? This is the training modules being formulated by the behaviorist. We still are using those modules which are being developed by the behaviorist to train various things. This is the behaviorist thought, and it is a very provoking and very revolutionary thought, that the individuals, regardless of their background, regardless of their where they are coming from, regardless of their economic conditions, regardless of their the area where they belong to, they can be trained to become the individuals they want to be. So we have started the training modules to train the army man, to train the teachers, to train the chefs, to train the engineers, to train the doctors. So this propagation of education technology is on the basis of behaviorism only. Then we see that from 1920 through the mid 1950s, until humanism and cognitive psychology have grown against the behaviorism, behaviorism was the dominant school of thought in psychology, and it has actually revolutionized the education psychology also. The main application of behaviorism, we have seen the most advanced application of behaviorism has been to the training in the education sector as well as the organizational behavior sector of industries. So what we see that behaviorism grow to become dominant school starting from the 1920s up to 1930. It has taken the world by storm by 1940, but near 1950s, the voices against the behaviorism have started, like the voices of humanism, like the voices of cognitive psychology, because whenever we are practicing the training, we have seen in the gradual practice, we have seen the various things which are the deficiency of behaviorism. Therefore, the shine of behaviorism have started coming down, and the voices against it has started. Some suggested that the popularity of behavioral psychology grew out of desire to establish psychology as an objective and measurable science. So most of the psychologists are actually taking up the behaviorism because it has given the flavor of objectivity to the study of psychology, and gradually the psychology became a measurable science. Whether we are measuring the intelligence, whether we are measuring the personality, gradually we have seen that through the dominance of behaviorism in the psychology, we have seen that gradually it becomes a more science than the social science. It is a social science because we are working on the psychology of the human beings, we are working for the betterment of the society, but still the study becomes scientific due to the contribution of behaviorism school of thought in psychology. Therefore, most of the psychologists say that popularity of the behaviorism is due to its importance in making the psychology as a scientific study. So, researchers are interested in creating theories that could be clearly described. They are working on, through the behaviorism, they can work on the theories which could be clearly described and empirically measured. We can see that now we can measure them empirically, like the personality theories. The behaviorist theories have started working on the empiricism of the research, and gradually it has used to make contribution that have influence on the fabric of everyday human life. It is actually influencing, the behaviorism is influencing every nook and corner of human life. How we can say? The society, be it education, be it the organization, be it institution, be it defense training. So we can go on naming every nook and corner, and we will see that behaviorist model is there, and behaviorism has actually worked on every corner of the society. Therefore, it becomes very popular, it becomes very dominant. Then we will say that now we will see the basic assumptions being made by the various behaviorists. So first assumption is all behavior is learned from the environment. So first assumption of the behaviorism is everything should be learned from the environment. So what we have seen, the environment has given us the first nomenclature in the behaviorism, that is stimuli. So stimuli, or singular is stimulus. So stimulus shapes the behavior. Therefore, they say that all behavior is learned from the environment. Behaviorism emphasizes the role of environmental factors, particularly the stimulus which an individual is getting in influencing the behavior, to the near exclusion of innate or inherited factors. They have actually discarded the innate or inherited factors. Therefore, the Watson has said in famous quote that whatever is the background of the child. So behaviorists are talking about the genetics or the inheritance. Inheritance is not very important. It is not very important factor in the development. Through the training, through the proper conditioning by the stimulus, the desired development can be achieved in the child. This amounts essentially to a focus on learning. So the behaviorism or the behaviorist model of theories, often people say that they are actually focusing on learning, training, behavior modification, organizational training. Everything is being concerned about the training. So we can say that as behavior is learned from the environment, so the study of behavior should be focused on the learning. Then we see the second assumption, psychology should be seen as a science. This is one of the prominent bases of behaviorism. We have seen the structuralism and functionalism, but the scientific fraternity is not accepting them as a pure science. So the movement of behaviorism is to establish the psychology as a pure science. Still it has not been established as a pure science, but their aim that it should look like the science, it should work like a science, it should be considered a science. So theories that has been constructed by the psychologist should be supported by empirical data obtained through careful and controlled observation and measurement of behavior. So we are not giving assumptions or various kind of propositions. We are actually giving the theories. So they should be supported by data. They should be supported by scientific tools like observation, measurement of the behavior. So what we see that psychology should be seen as science. This is one of the basic assumptions of behaviorism. Then we see that psychology, Watson has stated that psychology as a behaviorist view, it is a purely objective, experimental branch of natural science. Its theoretical goal is prediction and control of the behavior. Obviously, he is talking about the behavior. So, according to this is the statement of the Watson, psychology is a purely objective and experimental branch as a natural science, and its theoretical goal is to prediction and control of the behavior so that we can predict and control, so that we can train and learn for the child, for the other individuals also. Therefore, Watson say that it is a science. Then he says that the components of a theory should be as simple as possible and should be understood by the common man also. Therefore, he has said that as the science is for the common man, for the development and enhancement of the common man, so should the psychology be. So behaviorists propose the use of operational definitions. Now we have seen that after the behaviorism, the terms in the psychology has started cropping up. Like we have seen, the Thorndike has given the laws, Pavlov has given the classical conditioning, or the Skinner has given the reinforcement term, like he has given the conditioning term, operant term. So these kind of operational definitions defining variable terms of observable, measurable events or phenomena in the behavior of the human beings. So behaviorists have actually started giving the nomenclature that is the critical and specific terms within the psychology. And now we are studying those terms and we are identifying one behavior or one phenomena within the behavior from the other phenomena. Like we can differentiate between intelligence, cognition and mental ability. So cognitive abilities are different from the mental abilities and they are different from the various kind of abilities. So what we see that now we can difference the intellectual ability, mental ability. So these kind of nomenclature, these kind of operational definitions have started coming in the psychology also. This is one of the contribution of behaviorism, and this has established the psychology as a science also. Then we see the third assumption is behaviorism is primarily concerned with observable behavior. So the name behaviorism, it has given us the name of behaviorism. So the functionalist or structuralism is actually talking about the internal thinking, internal structures, brain processes, internal processes, emotions, thinking. But behaviorism is opposed to it. They are focusing only on observable behavior. They often accept the existence of cognition and emotions, but they prefer not to study them, as only observer behavior can be objectively and subjectively measured. They actually believe that the observable behavior can only be objectively and scientifically measured. Therefore, to establish behaviorism as the psychology as a science, so they have proposed that only observable behavior should be added. They are accepting the existence of cognition and emotions, but they believe that while we are studying the cognitions and emotions, we are just making the propositions. We are just arguing our case. They cannot be empirically proved, therefore they can't be theories or principles for defining or predicting the behavior of the individual or psyche of the individual. So they have focused on this thing. So the fourth assumption is, there is little difference between the learning that plays in the humans and that in other animals. They have also started the movement of, or we will say that practice of using animals as the subject, constructing and observing those animals' behavior and constructing theories, and then applying those theories for the human beings also. Like if we see the famous behaviorists like Thorndike, like Skinner, like Pavlov, Watson, everybody has experimented on animals. So they believe that it is one of their basic assumptions. There is very little difference between the learning that take place in humans and in other animals. There is no fundamental distinction. They mean that there is no fundamental, that is qualitative distinction between human and animal behavior. Therefore, research can be carried out on humans as well as animals. This particularly is called comparative psychology. So, particularly this will carried out as comparative psychology, and in gradually we have seen in psychology the comparative psychology has started, and we have started working on the sentient animals, whether the sentient animals are giving something, or if we are studying sentient animals and we are studying some behavior of the neuroscience, we can apply it to the human beings also. Still in the physiology, in the medical science, we use this theory and we used to work with the various experiments on them, like the stem cell experiment or the cloning experiment has been done on the animals also. But in psychology, the practice on animals, the experimentation on animals, the study of animals have been given and initiated by the behaviorists. Then we see the consequently rats, pigeons became the primary source of data for behaviorists, as their environment could be easily controlled. Because we have to study animals, we have to control their environment. That means that we have to condition their behavior. So if we have to condition their behavior, generally what we will take up? We will take up the small animals where environment we can easily manipulate and control. So the rats and pigeons become the major source of study. We will see that rats, cats, pigeons, rabbit, these all are the major source of study. Some have also taken up apes, like Kohler have taken up ape also. So these were the primary source of information. Then comes the behaviorism, fifth assumption, behavior is the result of stimulus response. SR theory we call it. This is called the SR theory or principle. So they say that stimulus response results in the behavior of the individuals. All behavior, no matter how complex they are, can be reduced to a simple stimulus response association. Watson described the purpose of psychology as, to quote the Watson, write down the statement, to predict, given the stimulus, what reaction will take place, or given the reaction, state what the situation or stimulus is that has caused the reaction. So Watson is saying in this statement that S is giving R. So by studying R we can identify S, or R is being received by S. So by studying the S we can assume, we can predict what will be the R. So he says that if we know various responses, we can understand stimulus. If we know stimulus, we can predict responses. So both ways we can understand the stimulus response association. So this was the last basic assumptions. Now we will move on towards the types of behaviorism. Historically, the most distinction between version of behaviorism is that Watson's original methodological behaviorism. And secondly, later on, the Skinner is the founder of this behaviorism, that is known as neo-behaviorism or the radical behaviorism. So there are two forms. The Watson's original, that is called methodological behaviorism, and the forms of behaviorism later inspired by collectively known as neo-behaviorism is radical behaviorism. So there are two types of behaviorism. So Alpna Madrena, we will actually take up the MCQ in the gradual time when we will complete the content of one topic where the questions are being asked with the various kind of perspectives. After we will study all perspectives, then we will take up the questions. Like we have completed the philosophical perspectives. On next lecture I will take up those questions which was provided to you all people on the app. So still, if you have not downloaded our app, download the Utkarsh app. It is available on the e-platform now. It is also available on iOS platform. Earlier it was only on Android. Now iOS app is also being released, so you can enjoy the app, you can install it and enjoy all the activities, all the benefits which is being provided free to all, as well as various paid courses are also there. If you like to have some paid courses, they are very reasonable priced, so you can also buy them. But the class and the questions based on these classes are being provided free to all individuals who have downloaded the app. It is also on the YouTube. The classes are also on the YouTube, but the questions, the PDF of this can be got on the app as well as on the Telegram. You can have that on Telegram. We will giving you the PDF, but for the questions you have to download the app. So let's move on. So first type of behaviorism is methodological behaviorism. Watson's article, Psychology as the Behaviorist Views It, is the first instance where we have seen that behaviorism has been given as a school of thought. It is referred to as the Behaviorist Manifesto, because the assumptions I have discussed earlier are based on this Watson's article, in which Watson outlines the principles of all behaviorists. And the principle which has been given by the Watson is actually describing the methodological behaviorism, where he talks about the why a study can be classified as a behaviorism, because the method he has taken up gives the school of thought the behaviorist model. Psychology, as we have seen it, psychology as behaviorist views it, as behaviorist views it, is a purely objective experimental branch. So as a methodological behaviorism, he has given that psychology in the behaviorism should be purely objective experimental branch of natural science. Its theoretical goal is prediction and control of behavior. Introspection forms no essential part of its methods, nor is the scientific value of its data depend upon readiness with which they lend themselves to interpretation in terms of consciousness. So he has expressed that the study which is purely objective, which is the experimental branch of natural science, which theoretical goal is prediction and control of behavior, should be considered as behaviorism. Not the study coming out of introspection, not the study actually studying the consciousness and interpreting it, So these studies, which is being popular in the structuralism and functionalism and the gestalt psychology, they are not behaviorist. The behaviorist study is the objective experimental branch of natural science as well as the prediction and control of behavior. So he has classified the first example, Pavlov's classical conditioning. He has worked upon the digestion. Actually, Pavlov has worked upon the digestion, and in digestion he has got the Nobel Prize of 1904, which he got in 1905. So, the Nobel Prize of 1904 medicine was being given to the Pavlov. So what we see? We see that during the period he has actually classified, studied various psychologists, various biologists also, various physiologists, and started collecting the data whom they are studying the behavior, control of behavior, and they are actually experimenting it objectively as a branch of natural science. He has classified Pavlov, he has classified Thorndike as the behaviorist, Clark Hull. So, this was the methodological behaviorism, which is talking about the methods. Now we will talk about the radical behaviorism. It was being founded by B.F. Skinner. Again, I have said earlier also, Skinner is the most popular psychologist of this era. Apart from the Freud and Skinner are called most popular psychologists. So, agreed with the assumption of methodological behaviorism that the goal of psychology should be to predict and control behavior. He is okay with this. He is okay with this, that the psychology should be focused to predict and control behavior. Therefore, he becomes a behaviorist. But Skinner also recognized the role of internal mental events. So he said that the internal mental events, whether it is mental processes, whether it is mental structures, whether it is elements of the brain, they cannot be neglected. While he agreed such private events could not be used to explain behavior. But he has said that they cannot be used to explain behavior. Therefore, he is said to have started the neo-behaviorism or the radical behaviorism. It has started with the discussion of Skinner, and later on the Hull's theory and the Guthrie theory, the Spence theory. These theories had contributed towards the radical behaviorism. The tall man has taken up the route between behaviorism and so Tausib Ahmed is asking internal mentally. That means internal mental events. That means mental processes, internal structures or mental structures, the consciousness, the structure of mind. These all have been termed by Skinner as the internal mental events. So he has talked about mental events. Therefore, he becomes the radical behaviorist. Skinner proposed internal mental events should be explained in the analysis of behavior. Behavior is determined by the environment, that is conditioning and nurture. So, he is talking about two things. Apart from the control and prediction of behavior, he is also talking about the internal mental events. Therefore, it becomes a neo-behaviorism, it becomes a radical behaviorism. Behavior is determined by the environment, that is conditioning and nurture, and radical behaviorism forms the core of philosophy behind behavior analysis, which later on becomes a dominant study in psychology, the behavior analysis. It is one of the basis of study of education psychology also, because in education psychology we actually analyze the behavior of the child to assess, to have the assessment, to have the various kind of diagnosis, feedback, remedy, evaluation. We have to do the behavior analysis of the child's behavior in the class. That gives us the insight into the what we have to teach, how we have to facilitate the learning of the child. So behavior analysis is the result of radical behaviorism, where we have actually congruated the various kind of things. So Jahangir Khan, MCQ method is not very good method because I am an education psychologist. I will not propagate those methods which are harmful for your cognition. So MCQs are to test our knowledge. They can't be the source of learning. Never learn from the MCQs. Mark my word, as an education psychologist, I am saying it, that never learn from the MCQs. Because whenever you learn from the MCQs, the memory you are making would contain 75% false statement. Because in every MCQ, one statement is correct and 3 statements are wrong. And you are making a memory out of these 4 statements where 3 statements are wrong, 1 is right. That is, whenever you are studying from MCQs, that will create wrong statements memory in your domain of learning. Therefore, it is very bad. First, you have to complete the theory, then we should discuss the MCQ. Yeah. After theory, we will have the MCQ. I have completed the philosophical perspective. Now, I will take up the MCQs of philosophical perspective. In the next session, I will take up this. So, be with us. I am an education psychologist. So, I would prefer those methods which are beneficial for any individual who is learning with me. So, bear with me. I will deal the MCQs, and that too, you will solve the questions. I am not going to solve those questions. I am just explaining and coherating whatever you are thinking. I will just coherent, you will see the words, whatever you are thinking, those words will be said by me at that time whenever you are doing the MCQs. Let us move on. So Pavlov, if we are talking about the history of behaviorism, we have seen the radical behaviorism. Now move on towards the history of behaviorism. So Pavlov published the first publication which is being classified as a behaviorism study has been by Watson, has been conducted by the Pavlov. Pavlov in 1897 published the results of an experiment on conditioning after originally studying the digestion in dogs. So he was studying digestion of dogs, and on the basis of these study, he has given the experiment on conditioning. So he got the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1904. Given to him in 1905. So in certain books we will see that 1905 has been given, in certain books 1904 has been given. Actually the Nobel Prize is of 1904, but it has been given in 1905. Then we will say that Thorndike formalized in the 1905 when Pavlov is getting the Nobel Prize. Thorndike has formalized the first law of learning, because he has given 3 fundamental laws and 5 subsidiary laws. The first law of effect was formalized in 1905. The same year he has conducted the famous experiment on cat, that is called trial and error experiment. So in the year the effect was due to the trial and error experiment which he has conducted on cat. So he has formalized the first law of learning, that is called the law of effect. Then we see Watson launches the behavioral school of psychology in 1930, publishing an article, Psychology as the Behaviorist Views It. So we have earlier also seen it. Now in 1920 he has started, in 1930 he has started working on Albert, and the experiment is called Little Albert experiment. where he has experimented on the various laws given by Pavlov and the laws of learning being given by the theory of the classical conditioning is being experimented on the little Albert, because Pavlov has experimented on dog. So Watson was criticized very much because he has actually experimented on Albert. Some people say that it is his son, some people say that he has adopted his son and Albert was the orphan. And what had become of the Albert after the study, after the conditioning, whether the deconditioning have been done by the Watson or not, because people often want to find the Albert but they haven't find it. So they have started criticizing Watson that he has started unethically on experimenting on the human child. So Watson and Reiner, you must have not heard the name of the other psychologist, that is the Reiner. So Watson and Reiner has conditioned Albert to fear a white rat. And then they have demonstrated it with the rabbit also. So demonstration was done by rabbit also. So Watson and Renner conditioned Albert to fear a white rat. That is the little Albert experiment. On the study of these experiments, he has written the book Behaviorism in 1925. This is the period from the publishing of behaviorism, publishing of article, publishing of partial results from 1920 to 1925 in various journals and magazines of the little Albert experiment. We have seen that the popularism of the behaviorism had started, and it has at the epitome up to 1930s and continues its journey of dominance up to 1950, when the humanism and cognitive psychology becomes the dominant force. Then we see the Skinner in 1936 wrote the book Behavior of Organisms. The behavior of organism, and introduce the concept of operant conditioning and shaping. So in 1936 he has given the concept of operant conditioning and shaping, and he has also given the reinforcement in this. In this book he has talked about the reinforcement and punishment theories. He has also given the reinforcement and punishment theories. Later on, he has also published a book, The Schedules of Reinforcement. But in 1936, he has published the operant conditioning theory and the shaping or the reinforcement theory. Then in 1943, we see the Clark Hull's Principle of Behavior book was published. Principles of Behavior. And it has revolutionized the radical behaviorism. The radical behaviorism being taken up by the Skinner, but it has been popularized by the Clark Hull, and he has actually popularized the work of Skinner also. Then we see the 1948 Skinner published Walden 2, in which he described a utopian society founded upon behaviorist principles. So in Walden 2, he has described a society which is purely based on behavior principles. So nowadays he has called it a classical conditioning. The conditioning given by the Pavlov is now being termed as the classical conditioning, because Skinner has described how the Walden 2, in Walden 2 he has described how the societies are developing through the classical conditioning as given by the Pavlov. Therefore, now the psychology have started giving the name after the operant conditioning have been published. They have started giving the name to the Pavlov's conditioning as the classical conditioning, which is being seen in every society, as being described by the Skinner in the Walden 2, where he is describing a utopian society and how it is being founded by the conditioning theories. Then Journal of the Experimental Analysis of Behavior began in 1958, which is still the most popular journal of the behaviorism. Then we see that Chomsky published his criticism of Skinner's behaviorism in the book Review of Verbal Behavior in 1955. Here started the decline of behaviorism as a favorite and dominant force. Now the cognitive psychologists like the Chomsky, like the Piaget, like Brunner, like the Collins, they have started criticizing the behaviorism. Bandura published a book called Social Learning Theory and Personality Development, which combines both cognitive and behavioral frameworks. Now the work of radical behaviorism have started. Bandura, who has conducted the famous Bobo doll experiment. Bandura is the person behind Bobo doll experiment. So he started the discussion of neo-behaviorism, that in social learning theory and personality development, he combines both cognitive and behavioral framework and given a new lease to the behaviorist model. Criticism of the behaviorism has taken its position from the dominant force, but the experiments of Bandura and the theory of Bandura has relived the behaviorism in the contemporary era. Then lastly, we will see that B.F. Skinner published his book Beyond Freedom of Dignity, where he argues that free will is an illusion. So he has criticized the critics in his book, because when he has given the Beyond Freedom and Dignity, everybody, cognitive theorists or humanism, are talking about the freedom and dignity, that the human mind should be free. We cannot be controlled by or predicted by the stimulus, by the environment, by the nurture. So he criticized and trying to establish his viewpoint again, that freedom and dignity, free will is an illusion. Nobody is free to thought. Nobody can thought beyond its culture. So if anybody cannot think beyond its culture, that means that his thinking process is being controlled by the cultural inputs which he is getting from the society. So Pujari is asking, utopian. Utopian means it is a place where utopia, we call it utopia, is a place in the Greece where he is talking about, he is actually discussing about the utopia as a city and its development as a society. So again he has written about behaviorism in 1964 and reflections of behaviorism society in 1978. So these are the last prominent books of Skinner. He has actually given one book in 1984 also, which was the last book. So what we see these were the books being given by Skinner. Yes, Falwin Chaudhary, we have noted your request and it has been sent to the authorities and management. We will see to it that we can start the English literature class on this channel as soon as possible. We will see to it. Pujari, I think you have understood the utopia. So I think that you have understood the concept of behaviorism very much. In the next class, in the next lecture, we will discuss the MCQs on the philosophical perspectives, which we have done earlier. So for the time being, I would prefer that everybody who is watching us should go through those lectures if you have still not seen them, so that when before doing the MCQs, you must have studied those lectures. You have must have studied those topics also. So for the time being, I am taking off. Goodbye to all of you. We will meet again. Namaskar. Good night. Good evening. Namaskar again.
Click on the subscribe button to subscribe to our channel. Press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update.
Download Karsh app from Google Play Store. Karsh app is one-stop solution for your competitive exam preparation with lots of unique and amazing features like create your own custom test, add YouTube videos in app library, add web reference link for quick revision, make your own custom flashcards. For each chapter, you can give online test and analyze your performance. So download Karsh app now.